The 58th session of the Senate in the second regular session of the 16th Congress is hereby called to order. Senator Aquilino Pimentel III will lead the chamber in prayer. Senator Pimentel.
The Bible reminds us that there is a season for every activity under the heavens. A time to be born, a time to die, time to heal, time to weep, time to mourn, time to search, time to mend, time to be silent, a time to speak, a time to love, a time for peace. Most Heavenly Father, once again we seek your divine guidance at this time when we are searching for the truth in many issues being discussed here in the Senate. We pray for wisdom, for discernment, for perseverance, for patience, and for courage. A grateful nation prays for the souls of our PNP staff operatives who made the ultimate sacrifice in losing their lives in the service of our country in Mama Sapano last January 25. May you welcome our heroes into your loving embrace, and may they find eternal peace in your presence. We lift up to you the families and friends they have left behind. Please help them recover from their loss at the soonest possible time. We lift up to you all the other casualties of the Mama Sapano incident, especially the civilians and the children. May you bless their souls and welcome them into your kingdom. We pray that all those injured, displaced, and affected by the incident be cured, healed, and made whole at the soonest possible time. Heavenly Father, Lord, protector of all living things, we entrust into your care all persons and institutions tasked with the difficult job of providing for our protection and making Philippine society safe, harmonious, and comfortably livable. The Armed Forces of the Philippines, the Philippine National Police, the National Bureau of Investigation, the Bureau of Immigration and Deportation, the PDA, the PDEA, the Aviation Security Group, the Bucor, the BJMP, and all other units and persons who have chosen the work, obligation, and duty to protect and preserve our values and our way of life. We thank you, Lord, for giving us these brave and courageous everyday heroes in our midst. And for us who are tasked to seek the truth and to work for a lasting peace, we humbly pray that you grant us the wisdom we need to achieve both for your greater glory. Please grant justice to those who seek it. Bless all our efforts so that the peace we build is not only what we need, but also what we deserve. We pray for peace in Mindanao. Thank you, Father, for all of our blessings. Amen.
Amen. The Secretary will call the roll.
Roll call of members. The Honorable Senators Angara, Aquino, Binay, Cayetano Alan, Peter Compañero S., Cayetano Pia S., Defensor Santiago, Ejercito, Enrile, Escudero, Estrada, Gingona, Hunasan, Lapid, Legarda, Marcos, Smenya, Pimentel, Poe, Recto, Revilla, Soto, Trillanes, Villar, Senate President Rilon.
There are 16 senators present. The chair declares the presence of a quorum. The majority leader.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we dispense with the reading of the journal of the 57th session, February 24, 2015, and consider the same as approved.
Any objection? Hearing none. The reading of the journal of session number 57 on Tuesday, February 24, 2015 is hereby dispensed with, and the same is hereby approved. With the permission of the chamber and with the consent of our colleagues, may we request that the reference of business be transferred as a last item in our agenda today so that we can avail of the presence of our colleagues on the substantial matters on the agenda. So may we request the majority leader to proceed to the ratification of the bicameral conference committee report with the permission of the chamber.
Yes, Mr. President, we are in receipt of the conference committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2138, entitled An Act Further Amending Presidential Decree number 1606 as amended, and House Bill number 5283, entitled An Act Strengthening Further the Functional and Structural Organization of the Sandiganbayan, further amending Presidential Decree number 1606 as amended, and appropriating funds therefore. So both bills are about the Sandiganbayan. Copies of the report have been distributed to the senators. Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we consider the aforesaid Conference Committee report.
Any objection? Hearing none. The ratification of the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions on Senate Bill 2138 and House Bill 5283 is in order.
So I move, Mr. President, that this representation be recognized as the sponsor of the Bicameral Conference Committee report.
Senator Aquilino Pimentel III is recognized to submit for the approval of the Chamber the Bicameral Conference Committee report. Senator Pimentel is recognized for that purpose.
The Conference Committee on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2138 and House Bill number 5283, after having met and fully discussed the subject matter in a conference, hereby report to their respective houses that the following. That, number one, the conferees agreed to use the House version as the working draft. Number two, Section 1 of the House version on Section 3 of PD 1606 as amended. Constitution of the divisions quorum was adopted with the following amendments. On page 1, line 5, change the phrase 3 justices to 3, then parenthesis number 3, close parenthesis, members. And on page 2, line 1, change the word justices to members. Number 3, Section 2 of the House version on Section 4 of PD 1606 as amended, jurisdiction was adopted with the following amendments. On page 2, line 20, remove the open and close parentheses before and after the letter A, before the word violations, and add a period thereafter. On page 2, line 21, we capitalize the first letter of the word graft. On page 3, line 18, we change the conjunction or to and between the word superintendent and higher. On page 3, line 23, we deleted the dash before the word controlled. On page 3, line 26, we changed the word up to higher. On page 4, line 9, we removed the open-close parenthesis before and after the letter B before the word other and added a period thereafter. On page 4, line 10, in the word complex, we added the letters, capital letters E and D after the letter, small letter X to change the said word to complexed. Letters E and D, not capital letters E and D. On page 4, line 11, we removed the open-close parenthesis in the letter A between the word subsection and off and added a period thereafter. On page 4, line 13, we removed the open-close parenthesis before and after the letter C, before the word civil, and added a period thereafter. On page 4, line 18, we deleted the phrase or bribe after the word damage and changed this to the government or any bribery. On page 4, line 19, we deleted the phrase B, alleges damage or bribe that are unquantifiable, and we renumbered accordingly. On page 4, line 20, we deleted the phrase or bribe after the word damage and changed this to the government or bribery. On page 4, line 21, we inserted the phrase in an amount between the words acts and not. And on page 6, line 5, we deleted the dash before the word control. Number 4, Section 3 of the House version on Section 5 of PD 1606 as amended, proceedings how conducted, votes required, was adopted with the following amendments. On page 7, line 3, we deleted the phrase votes required and changed this to decision by majority vote. On page 7, lines 4 to 5, we deleted the phrase, all three members of a division shall deliberate on a case submitted for judgment or final order, and change this to all three, parenthesis number 3, members of a division shall deliberate on all matters submitted for judgment, decision, final order, or resolution. On page 7, line 6 to 7, we deleted the phrase, two justices in, and changed this to a majority of the members of. On page 7, line 8, we inserted the article A before the word judgment. Still on page 7, line 8, we inserted a comma after the word judgment. Still on page 7, line 8, we inserted the word decision between the words judgment and or, and a comma thereafter. Still on page 7, line 8, we changed the comma, we changed the period into a comma after the word order and inserted the phrase, or to resolve interlocutory or incidental motions. So number 5, section 4 of the House version on funding and appropriations was adopted. Number 6, section 5 of the House version on transitory provision was adopted with the following amendments. On page 7, line 23, we inserted the phrase, on proceedings, comma, how conducted, semicolon, decision by majority vote, between the words amended and shall. Number 7, section 6 of the House version on separability clause was adopted. Number 8, section 7 of the House version on repealing clause was adopted. And number 9, section 8 of the House version on effectivity was adopted. Number 10, the title of the House version was adopted to read as follows: an act strengthening further the functional and structural organization of the Sandiganbayan, comma, further amending Presidential Decree number 1606, comma, as amended, comma, and appropriating funds therefore. In case of a conflict between the statements, amendments stated in this joint explanatory statement and that of the provisions of the consolidated bill in the accompanying Conference Committee report, the provisions of the latter shall prevail. So this is all, Mr. President.
The Chair now is prepared to receive the motion for the approval of the Bicameral Conference Committee report.
So I move, Mr. President, that we approve the Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill number 2138 and House Bill number 5283 on the Sandiganbayan.
Any objection? Hearing none, the Bicameral Conference Committee report on the disagreeing provisions of Senate Bill 2138 and House Bill 5283 is hereby approved.
May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr.
1
President?
minute suspension.
We are ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
Before we recognize Senator Cayetano for her privileged speech, let us acknowledge, Mr. President, the Ateneo de Manila third-year legal management students headed by Attorney Rhea Samson, who are here with us.
We welcome the third-year legal management students of the Ateneo de Manila University, accompanied by Attorney Rhea Samson. Welcome to the Senate. Make of record the presence of the students from Ateneo. Welcome to the Senate.
Also, let us welcome the students of Little Ones of the Infant Jesus, Mr. President.
The students of the Little Ones of the Infant Jesus. Your presence is made of record in today's session, and we welcome you to the Senate.
Mr. President, I move that Senator Pia Cayetano be recognized to speak on a matter of public interest.
Senator Pia Cayetano is recognized.
Start na ako dyan. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, esteemed colleagues, today I rise on a matter of personal and collective privilege to bring attention to rare diseases or orphan disorder, which are health conditions that result from genetic defects that rarely affect the general population. 75% of rare diseases affect children. A few months ago, we had the privilege of having some of these children here in the Senate during the hearing for the Rare Disease Bill, the committee report of which is currently being finalized and will be filed soon. This week, we celebrate National Rare Disease Week, which culminates in Rare Disease Day on February 28th. 2015 marks the 8th consecutive year of Rare Disease Day, and this year's theme, Living with a Rare Disease, focuses on the daily lives of patients, families, and caregivers who are living with a rare disease. This year, it pays tribute to the million of parents, siblings, relatives, and friends whose daily lives are affected and who are living day by day, hand in hand, with rare disease patients. I know from experience the challenges they face because I cared for and lost my youngest son due to complications from a rare congenital disease called trisomy 13. My son had a hole in his heart. He was perceived to be blind and deaf. He had tumors in his kidney, and he would never walk or talk. Over 6,000 different rare diseases have been identified to date. And this directly affects the daily lives of more than 30 million people in Europe alone. Because rare diseases are often chronic, debilitating, and life-threatening, patients need not only special medical treatment, but also solidarity, support, and care from their loved ones. During the hearing, a number of children with rare diseases came, and I'd like to present to you 3 siblings, Vicente and twins Peter and John Parco, 3 brothers who are living with Hunter syndrome. This is a rare genetic disorder that occurs when an enzyme your body needs is either missing or doesn't work properly. This eventually causes permanent progressive damage that affects their appearance, mental development, organ function, and physical abilities. These brothers are currently taking a maintenance drug, and they are living fairly normal lives. The twins are now in 4th year high school, while Vicente is in his 3rd year. They each have their own aspiration. Vicente dreams of someday being a cop, John wants to be a cartoonist, and Peter wishes to be an IT specialist. Other children affected with rare diseases do not share the same situation as the Parco brothers, who have been fortunate enough to receive help and support to sustain the maintenance drugs they need. The treatments and drugs for rare diseases are not easy to find, and even when they are available, they are often too expensive. Thus, they are usually beyond the means of many patients. This is where the government must step up to help these children and their families. During the budget deliberations for the Department of Health, I raised the need to fund healthcare and assistance for rare disease patients and proposed that 100 million be taken from the proceeds of sin tax for this purpose. As part of the events for the Rare Disease Week, I, along with the Philippine Society for Orphan Disorder, invite everyone to share in the celebration by joining 2 awareness campaigns. The first is to raise your hands for rare. Take a photo, selfie, or groupie with your hands raised and post this on the Facebook site for National Rare Disease Week. Raising your hands for rare diseases means you are adding your voice to the call for better support for Filipinos afflicted with rare diseases. The second is the Global Genes Project, where That You Care awareness campaign. This is a worldwide campaign that encourages people to wear blue denim ribbons and their favorite pair of jeans on February 28, this year's World Rare Disease Day, to recognize rare disease and support the millions who are fighting and living with rare and genetic diseases. Mr. President, these are small acts and gestures that we can do to show our solidarity for patients with rare diseases and their families and friends who stay by their side to support and care for them. Through greater awareness and positive action, we can work towards providing not only better health care for them, but also a better understanding and nurturing world for them to live in. And more importantly, support for the committee report that I will soon sponsor that will allow them to go a long way and it will help us alleviate the plight of these children and their families. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pia Cayetano.
Mr. President, no senator has signified his or her intention to interpellate Senator Cayetano, Pia Cayetano. So I move that we refer the speech to the Committee on Health and Demography.
Any objection? Hearing none, so referred.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2581 under Committee Report number 95. This is the Continuing Professional Development Bill, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of the measure Senate Bill 2581 under Committee Report number 95 is in order.
Mr. President, the sponsor, Senator Trillanes, had delivered his sponsorship speech last January 27. I thus move that we open the period of interpellations.
The period for debates, period for interpellation is hereby opened.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Trillanes.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay. So, Mr. President, no senator has signified. Senator Soto? May we ask that Senator Soto be recognized, Mr. President?
Senator Soto is recognized.
Mr. President, may we just have a copy of the sponsorship speech, and then I will perhaps, if the majority leader would like to close the period of interpellation now, I will not pose any objection, but if they will allow me to ask some questions during the period of individual amendments, just in case there is something that I missed in the sponsorship.
What would the majority leader say?
Yes, Your Honor. I think we have done that in the past, but can we direct the Secretariat to give Senator Soto the speech he requested?
All right. So if there is no objection from the majority leader, we will now proceed.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, there being no interpellations, I move that we close the period of interpellation.
The period of interpellation is terminated, subject to the reservation of the minority leader when the appropriate time comes and when he believes that there's something to be clarified in the measure, then he can propose questions before the period of amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is in order. The chair is now prepared to receive the committee amendments from the sponsor.
There's no committee amendments, Mr. President.
There are no committee amendments.
So, Mr. President, there being no committee amendments on the measure, I move that we close the period of committee amendments.
Committee amendments, period for committee amendments is terminated.
So we now reach the point where we of the period of individual amendments. So I so move, Mr. President, that we open the period of individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments is in order.
Senator Soto.
The minority leader is recognized.
Yes, Mr. President, with the indulgence of the gentleman on the floor, may we ask that we be given time to prepare the individual amendments so we can take this up perhaps Monday or Tuesday next week?
Yes. The request is reasonable.
Yes, Mr. President. The sponsor is nodding his head. He has no objection, yes, Mr. President.
All right, so we defer the consideration of the period for individual amendments until the next session. Yes.
So at this point, I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2581 under Committee Report number 95.
Consideration of Senate Bill 2581 is hereby suspended.
A minute suspension, Mr. President.
1 minute suspension. Meron pang ay.
We are ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2436 under Committee Report number 83.
Any objection?
This is
Hearing
the
none.
legislative bill on the practice of pharmacy, Mr. President.
Consideration of the measure is in order.
Mr. President, the parliamentary status of the measure is that we are in the period of individual amendments. I thus move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Trillanes.
Senator Trillanes is recognized.
And
Thank you, Mr.
with the
President.
consent of the sponsor, I move to also recognize Senator Bam Aquino for proposed individual amendments.
Senator Bam Aquino is recognized for the proposed amendments.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and thank you to the good senator for allowing us to propose these amendments. On page 7, line 12, before the word licensed, insert FDA dash. So the provision shall now read as follows. Online pharmacy services refer to pharmaceutical services of a duly FDA licensed pharmaceutical outlet over the internet. So move, Mr. President.
Any objection?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any Oh, yes, Senator.
Mr. President,
Soto.
are we in the period of individual amendments?
That's correct, sir.
I have an anterior amendment, Mr. President. Will you allow me, or will that finish the individual amendments of Senator Aquino?
Maybe you can just allow Senator Aquino to finish it, and we'll go back to you. We don't mind the anterior.
Well, if anybody else does not mind, I will not
Yeah.
mind. Thank you, Mr. President. Just for the record.
Yes.
We used to do it that way, if you recall.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
So I may proceed, Mr. President.
Okay, the Aquino amendment being accepted to be sponsored, there being no objection, approved.
Mr. President, on page 7, line 14, after the word prescription, add the phrase, provided it is offered for sale in government licensed outlets, comma, including non-traditional outlets, period. So the provision shall now read as follows. Over-the-counter OTC medicines refer to medicines used for symptomatic relief or minor ailments, comma, and which may be dispensed without a prescription, comma, provided it is offered for sale in government licensed outlets, including non-traditional outlets, period.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, on page 7, line 25, before the word activity, add the phrase FDA-approved marketing. So the provision will now read as follows. Pharmaceutical marketing refers to any FDA-approved marketing activity undertaken, organized, or sponsored by a pharmaceutical establishment and or outlet which is directing at promoting their product, period. So move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Next, Mr. President, on page 8, line 30, before the word medicine, add the word FDA registered. The provision shall now read as follows. Physician samples refer to FDA registered medicines given to health professionals for promotional purposes only, period. So move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, on page 9, after line 12, add a new subsection to read as follows. Number 47, veterinary drug or medicine shall refer to drugs, comma, in bulk form or commercial preparations, comma, intended for use in animals for the purpose of treatment, comma, vaccination, comma, prevention, comma, cure or diagnosis of disease, comma, including any drug intended to be admixed in animal feeds for the purpose of growth promotion or managing animal stress, period. It shall not include animal feeds, comma, but veterinary or animal products containing drugs, comma, such as microbial medicated feeds, comma, additives for dissolving water / liquid preparations for drinking, comma, and antimicrobial medicated premixes for admixing in animal rations, comma, in bulk or commercial forms or packaging shall be considered veterinary drug or medicine, period. So move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, on page 18, line 15, after the word dependents, add the phrase or members of a duly registered organization or institution, semicolon. So move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 18, line 24, before the word establishment, comma, insert the phrase or be. So move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 18, line 25, delete the comma after the word establishments and replace it with a period. So the provision shall now read as follows, Mr. President. A pharmacist working in a category A or B establishments may be allowed to simultaneously work or render pharmacy services in category B establishments, period.
Any objection?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
And finally, Mr. President, on page 19, line 38, delete the punctuation period and replace it with semicolon, provided that, comma, DOH procured medicines shall not be sold by privately owned drug outlets, semicolon. I so move, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Approved.
That's all, Mr. President, and I'd like to thank the good sponsor. Thank you very much.
Likewise, Mr. President, I'd like to thank the good senator for his inputs to further improve our bill, Mr. President.
Mr. President, with the consent of the sponsor, I move that we recognize Senator Pia Cayetano for proposed individual amendments.
Senator Cayetano is recognized.
May I ask for a minute suspension, Mr. President?
1 minute suspension.
Nakailang balik na ho kayo.
Mr. President, ready to resume.
Session is resumed.
With the indulgence of the sponsor, I'd like to propose some amendments, if you will allow.
Very much so, Mr. President.
Thank you. I will start with, well, actually, I will make my amendment and then I will give the rationale for to put on record as well. On page 2, line 13, on section 4, on the scope of practice of pharmacy, delete the phrase administration of adult vaccines, and at the end of that paragraph, insert another subsection 3 to read as follows. Administer vaccines for adult influenza and such other adult vaccines as may be approved by the Food and Drug Administration, open parenthesis, FDA, close parenthesis, colon, provided, comma, that they shall undergo the required immunization training as may be provided for by the Department of Health, open parenthesis, DOH, close parenthesis, and the accredited integrated professional organization. Sorry, let me just go back. Required immunization training program. The rationale for this is as follows.
Can we just finally read how
Yes.
the amendments, the amendment will read?
The amendment, Mr. President, shall read as follows. The existing Section 2 with the deletion I propose will read as follows. Render services such as but not limited to clinical, pharmacy services, drug information service, regulatory services, pharmaceutical marketing, medication management, chemical and microbiological analysis and assay of foods, drugs, cosmetics, and or other pharmaceutical products, or whenever the expertise and the technical knowledge of the pharmacist is required. Or, additional Section 3, administer vaccines for adult influenza and such other adult vaccines as may be approved by the Food and Drug Administration, open parenthesis, FDA, close parenthesis, provided that they shall undergo the required immunization training program as may provided by the Department of Health, open parenthesis, DOH, close parenthesis, and the accredited integrated professional organization.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
To just put on the record, the rationale for this is as follows. This is to ensure that the pharmacists are not only well equipped to administer the vaccines, but are likewise trained to address any possible complications that may arise from the administration of the vaccines. In other countries, pharmacists are allowed to administer vaccines for influenza, such as US, UK, Portugal, and Canada. However, they are required to undergo immunization training. In the U.S., immunization training for pharmacists is provided by both the American Pharmacists Association and the universities. Included in the training are the following: pharmacy-based immunization delivery and live training seminars. In the UK, besides the appropriate training for immunization, pharmacists shall also have undergone basic life support training within the last 3 years and have updated their basic life support training every 12 months.
Thank you, Senator Cayetano. Please proceed.
Thank you. Yes, may just put on record that we need to renumber the succeeding subsections accordingly.
Sorry, numbered.
On page 2A, line 33, delete.
2A?
Yes,
Okay.
2A.
Line?
Line 33, delete the phrase add to, comma, delete, comma, or. I submit.
Accepted, Mr. President.
I proceed, Mr. President.
May we know the rationale of such amendment?
Yes, actually, Mr. President, there is a succeeding amendment. So together, I will give the rationale, Mr. President.
Okay, so in the meantime, the deletion of the phrase add to, comma, delete, or on line 33 on page 2A has been accepted by the sponsor. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, line 2,
Yes.
after the word profession, at the end of the line, add the word, after the word profession, delete period and insert, provided that such modifications are consistent with the enumeration above. Thus, the paragraph will read as follows. The board, subject to the approval of the Professional Regulation Commission, open parenthesis, PRC, close parenthesis, herein called the Commission as provided for by Republic Act 8981, otherwise known as PRC Modernization Act of 2000, and in consultation with the accredited integrated professional organization, may modify the above enumerated acts, services, or activities as the need arises in order to conform to the latest trends and developments in the practice of the pharmacy provision, provided that such modifications are consistent with the enumeration above. I submit.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The rationale, Mr. President, for the last two amendments is that the board does not have the power to add or delete anything in the scope of the practice of the pharmacy as stated in the law. The power is with Congress. That's why it is simply the modification that we proposed.
Thank you.
Next item. On page 4, line 1 to 6. Revise the definition of cosmetics to read as follows. Cosmetics means any substance or preparation intended to be placed in contact with the various external parts of the human body or with the teeth and the mucous membranes of the oral cavity with a view exclusively or mainly to cleaning them, perfuming them, changing their appearance and or correcting body odor and or protecting the body or keeping them in good condition, containing pharmaceutical components that may alter its composition and may thus result to adverse effects. I submit.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Mr. President, the rationale for this is to ensure that only those cosmetics that may have possible adverse effects, given its pharmaceutical component, are subjected to the supervision and monitoring of pharmacists.
Very good.
This definition is limited only to this law and will not amend other existing laws. I move on to the next point. On page 5, line 12. Delete drug after national. I submit.
I accept the amendment, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The rationale here, Mr. President, is what is currently used is Philippine National Formulary, consistent with Administrative Order number 2012-0023, or the revised implementing guidelines for the Philippine National Formulary System, otherwise known as the PNFS. And I move on to the next item, which is on page 5, line 23. Delete 9711 and replace it with 9502. I submit.
Accepted, Mr. President.
9502. Is this a typographical error? This is a very substantive.
Let me explain, Mr. President. RA number 9711, or the FD law, made no reference to herbal and or traditional drugs, but it is RA 9502, or the cheaper medicine law, that did.
All right. What does the sponsor say again?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you. On the same page 5, line 23 to 24, delete and in Article 1, Section 5, subparagraph 16 of this Act.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Accepted, Mr. President.
The rationale for this is an enumeration of drugs, but food, dietary/health supplements are not drugs. Therefore, they should not be part of the definition of drugs.
All right.
Next item, on page 6, line 26 to 37, and until page 7, lines 1 to 2, revising the definition of medical device to read as follows. Medical device means any instrument, apparatus, implement, machine, appliance, implant, in vitro, reagent, or calibrator, software, material, and or similar or related article intended by the manufacturer to be used alone or in combination for human beings for one or more of the specific purpose, open parenthesis, letter S, close parenthesis, of, diagnosis, prevention, monitoring, treatment, or alleviation of disease, diagnosis, monitoring, treatment, alleviation of, or compensation for an injury, investigation, replacement, modification, or support of the anatomy or of a physiological process, supporting or sustaining life, preventing infection, control of conception, disinfection of medical devices, and providing information for medical or diagnostic purposes by means of in vitro examination of specimens derived from the human body. This device does not achieve its primary intended action in or on the human body by pharmacological, immunological, or metabolic means, but which may be assisted in its intended function by such means, which, when in contact with pharmaceutical products or with improper use, may compromise delivery and efficacy of drug products and or may result to treatment failure or adverse event. I submit.
Accepted, Mr. President.
What is accepted? Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
The rationale for this, Mr. President, is to ensure that only those devices that may have possible adverse effect, given its pharmaceutical component, are subjected to the supervision and monitoring of pharmacies. This definition is limited only to this law and will not amend other existing laws. On page 7, after line 2, insert a definition for medication management, which will now read as follows. Medication management is the delivery of patient-centered care achieved through collaboration and communication with patients and healthcare professionals in order to optimize safe, effective, and appropriate drug therapy, and which involves assessment of patients' medication-related needs, identification of actual or potential drug therapy problems, and documentation of drug therapy outcomes. I submit.
Can we have the rationale
Yes.
for the record?
Mr. President, we submit this amendment to add this definition to ensure that the role of pharmacists is to support the clinical diagnosis and disease illness management assessment decisions of physicians. Pharmacists should properly advise counsel patients of the most effective method to use the prescribed pharmaceutical products based only on existing literature and advise them of possible adverse effects, if any.
What does the sponsor say?
I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
May we also put on record the need to renumber given the amendment.
The Secretary is directed to do so.
Next item is on page 8A, line 34. On the definition of prescription ethical medicines, delete optometrists. The rationale for this is optometrists do not prescribe medicines. I submit.
Delete optometrist.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 12, page 12, lines 7 to 9. Delete the following phrase: comparable to the compensation and allowances received by the members of other existing professional regulatory boards under the Commission, and replace it with subject to existing rules and regulations issued by the Department of Budget and Management, parentheses, DBM, close parentheses. In other words, the phrase will read as follows: the members of the board shall receive compensation and allowances subject to existing rules and regulations issued by the Department of Budget and Management, open parentheses, DBM, close parentheses, as provided in the General Appropriations Act. I submit.
May the chair know what's the difference between how it is phrased now and the amendment proposed by the Senator Cayetano?
Actually, Mr. President, the original phraseology simply wanted to align the salaries, the compensation with existing professional regulatory boards.
Yes.
However, we propose that we simply leave it up to, we want to ensure that it is consistent with existing DBM guidelines, and so we submitted that it just be consistent with
So
DBM
it can
rules.
be higher than the comparable compensation of members of other existing professional regulatory boards?
Technically, Mr. President, higher or lower. We just felt that as long as it's consistent with DBM. But if His Honor has any other suggestion, I mean,
Maybe we can retain
re-
this.
really the objective was that consistent with DBM. We did not want to just say align it with other regulatory boards. We just wanted to ensure that it was consistent with
All right.
DBM rules.
Okay. What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Here and now.
Thank you. Next item is on page 18. Line 3. insert first to third class, the phrase first to third class between and municipal. So the line will read, government units including local government, city and first to third class municipal health units, non-government organizations and or associations involved in the procurement, distribution, dispensing, and storage of pharmaceutical products. The rationale for this is that we believe that it is only the financial capacity of the other municipal units may not allow them to provide for this, and therefore we limit the requirement to first to third class municipal health units, as we have done in other bills that are now laws that we have filed in the past, wherein we require additional positions in local government units. I submit.
I accept, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none.
Thank you. On the same page, after line 16, insert another subsection 4 to read as follows. Fourth, fifth, and sixth class municipal health units involved in the procurement, distribution, dispensing, and storage of pharmaceutical products. The rationale here is, again, as I mentioned, this is consistent with recognizing that the the lower class municipalities do not have the same financial capacities as the others.
Mr. President, may we know what page that is again? I'm sorry.
Yes, page 18.
I got lost.
Page 18.
18.
Yes.
A.
Yes.
18. 18.
Page 18, line 17. Is that correct?
Line 16, Mr. President.
Line, what line is it?
Line 16.
Line 16, Mr. President.
16, I'm sorry, line 16.
Mr. President,
Yes,
the proposed amendment was accepted.
before that, the chair would like to seek some clarification. Can the sponsor spread into the record what is the difference between category A and category B insofar as the hiring of pharmacists are concerned?
President. Move to suspend the for 1
minute
minute.
suspension.
Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
On category A, pharmaceutical establishments, outlets where direct and immediate control and supervision of a duly registered and licensed pharmacist is required whenever open for business, whether in-store or online, including 1. Pharmaceutical establishments, outlets selling or otherwise making available to the consuming public prescription/ethical medicine. Pharmacies only over-the-counter medicine, whether owned by the government or by a private person or firm, whether sold at wholesale or retail. 2. Departments/divisions/units of pharmaceutical laboratories, pharmaceutical manufacturing laboratories, and or other establishments with processes involving the preparation, manufacture, assay, regulation, product research and development, quality control, repacking, importation, exportation, distribution, sale or transfer pharmaceutical products in quantities greatly in excess of single therapeutic doses. And 3. Government units, including local government, city, and first to third class municipal health units, non-government organizations and or associations involved in the procurement, distribution, dispensing, and storage of pharmaceutical products.
Now, in those three categories, the employment of a duly registered and licensed pharmacist is required.
Yes.
Now,
Mr. President.
just to cut short, just to clarify exactly where I'm referring to, it would appear to me that in category B, the same requirement is imposed, enumerating again all the establishments which would be required to hire a pharmacist. So I don't know what is the difference between category A and category B. Lahat naman sila kailangan mag-hire ng pharmacist.
May I?
Yes.
May I
Gladly
elaborate,
Yes,
Mr.
please.
Mr. President, with the indulgence of the sponsor? Our understanding is in category A, this is direct and immediate control and supervision. So these are direct hires, as the Senate President has mentioned. But in category B, the phrase used is supervision and oversight. In other words, what the intention here is that the groups mentioned can cluster.
Sorry?
The groups mentioned can cluster together and hire together one pharmacist that will be in charge of supervision and oversight, as opposed to category A, which is direct and immediate control and supervision. Hence, the nature of our amendment is we differentiate the outlet, the local governments that are cities or first and second class, because by nature they have bigger population, more affluent. They will have bigger pharmaceutical needs.
We understand the
Yes.
amendment of Senator Cayetano that you make a distinction between first, third class
Right.
municipalities on the one hand, and fourth and fifth and sixth class municipalities on the other. The question of the chair is, what
general
is in
categories.
general what is the difference between
Well,
the requirements of the law for those falling under category A and category B? The answer I'm getting is that under category A,
direct
the wording is
direct and immediate control and
direct and
supervision.
immediate control and supervision,
Yes.
meaning
What that means, Mr. President, is full-time job.
A
They should be
full-time
there.
job.
They
All
should
right.
be there all the time. They cannot be supervising various outlets.
all right, fine. What about in category B?
They can be supervising various outlets. They can be moving around. They can have another job and be just spending, a limited amount of time overseeing all those listed in category B.
Mr.
Is
President.
that correct, Mr. Sponsor?
Yes, it's correct. But just to add to that, the limit for every pharmacist is up to 15 outlets for the category B, Mr. President.
Ano yun? Limit.
And it says required under pertinent provisions of the law, including. It would appear to me that the enumeration is merely illustrative. Is that a correct understanding? There are there are various laws which require pharmacists to be hired on a not really on a part-time basis, in effect. No?
Mr. President, if I may,
Please.
this also concerns my earlier amendment. No.
Yes.
In reality, Mr. President, there are a number of places in the Philippines where it's very difficult to put up drugstores because there aren't enough pharmacists.
Mhm.
So in more established areas or more urbanized areas, you can actually have a lot of pharmacists who are looking for jobs and will be linked up to Category A establishments. But in far-flung areas, sometimes these pharmacists don't want to locate in far-flung areas, and so there was a need
Yeah.
to create a Category
Yes.
B where they could be responsible for a larger number of outlets, Mr. President.
In other words, those under Category B need not have pharmacists on a full-time
Yes, Mr. President.
basis. They can have non-licensed pharmacists manning the store while the full-fledged and
I think they're called pharmacy assistants, Mr. President.
pharmacist assistants.
Opo. Yes, Mr.
The
President.
pharmacist assistants can be full-time, and that's allowed.
Yes, but they still need to have a licensed pharmacist overseeing their,
That's fully
their
understood.
establishments.
That's fully understood. But the enumeration from line 9 to line 19 is non-inclusive. In other words, it can add others because
Yes.
that's the wording, including, appears to be simply the establishments from 9 to 19 are simply illustrative.
Yes, Mr. President, because right now it's already defined by the FDA.
Okay.
Actually, Mr. President, I have an amendment on that to clarify.
Okay.
The existing line, I
First,
will
can we
explain.
can
as
we can
yes.
we first act on that amendment on?
Yes, so I submit the earlier
is that on
amendment.
line 16?
On line 16, Mr. President.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Approve. Okay. Next amendment.
And may we also request for the renumbering of the succeeding subsections
Okay.
accordingly.
The Secretariat is directed to do so.
My next amendment, I think, will address the concern of the Senate President. On the same page 18, line 21, insert the word FDA in coordination with the, between the words the and board, and insert and before with to read as follows. The FDA, in coordination with the board and with the approval of the commission, may add to, delete, reclassify, or modify the above list of establishments as the need arises in order to keep pace with developments in the pharmacy practice. I submit.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? None approved.
So just to read into the record, this is precisely to acknowledge that the FDA has been doing this, and we now formalize through this law that the FDA, along with the board, does have the authority to reclassify, add, or delete. That's it, Mr. President. I have no more amendments, and I thank the good
All right.
sponsor for indulging my proposed amendments. Thank you.
Any other amendment? Minority Leader was earlier reserving his right to introduce amendments. Senator Soto is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the distinguished gentleman yield to some amendments? Very few amendments, Mr. President.
Yes, Mr. President.
On page 1, section 1, line 4, replace the year 2014 with 2015.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none approved.
On page 14, Mr. President, section 20, from lines 32 to 33. After the article "the," delete the phrase "certificate of good standing" (COGS) from the AIPO of pharmacists end. Mr. President, non-membership to the accredited Integrated Professional Organization, or the AIPO, should not bar any professional from renewing their professional identification card, or PIC as they call it, or professional license for that matter. I firmly believe that a board passer's rights to renew their license to practice their profession should not be curtailed for a simple reason that he is not a member of the AIPO. So I move to delete that particular phrase, Mr. President, with the acceptance of the sponsor, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
Maybe the amendment should, the deletion should start on line 33 up to the word "of," rather than line 32, the certificate of, so that the sentence will now read, the PIC shall be renewed every 3 years upon presentation of the certificate of completion of the CPD requirements.
I submit to the wisdom of the Senate President,
It's just a matter of
Mr. President.
style.
Yes, Mr. President.
All
Accepted,
right.
Mr. President.
Approved.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. On the same page, after line 37, insert a new section 21, which shall read as follows. Section 21, continuing professional development, parenthesis, CPD, close parenthesis. All pharmacists shall abide by the requirements, rules, and regulations on continuing professional development to be promulgated by the PRC Regulatory Board, subject to the approval of the Commission, in coordination with the APO for nurses or any duly accredited education institutions. For the purpose, a CPD Council is hereby created to implement the CPD program. Mr. President, this is to justify it. This is a standard provision found in all our professional regulatory laws that we have recently passed in this chamber. So the CPD is a way of equipping all our professionals with enough tools in order to upgrade their competence or competencies to be at par with the international standards, Mr. President. So if the sponsor will accept.
The sponsor would accept, provided we change the word nurses to pharmacists. Mr.
I'm sorry. Yes, Mr. President.
Accepted, Mr. President.
All right, just
Agree.
Matter of style.
Yes.
Can we make that paragraph B of section 20, and the first paragraph should be paragraph A, so that we do not have to renumber the subsequent sections, Senator Soto?
Yes, Mr. President, I submit.
Matter of form.
Yes,
Yes.
I submit. I agree.
I submit, Mr. President.
So section 20 will have two paragraphs. Letter A, issuance of certificate of registration professional identification card as amended, and then letter B, the amendment as read by
Continuing
Senator
professional
Soto
development,
and
yes.
accepted by the sponsor. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. On page 22, section 42, from lines 6 to 8, after the word profession, delete the entire sentence starting from the article the all the way to the word met. Because the same reason, Mr. President, on the earlier stipulations on the non-renewal of professional license for being a non-member with the AIPO.
Okay. Can you
Move to
please
delete.
repeat the amendment, Senator Soto?
I move to delete from lines 6 to 8 from the word profession. After the word profession, after the word profession, delete the entire sentence starting from the article the all the way to the word met.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. And finally, page 23 all the way to page 24, entire Section 45, I move to delete, Mr. President, because the same reason on the earlier stipulations on the issue of non-membership with the AIPO, particularly on subparagraph 1 and 2, while the rest of the provision contained therein already exists in Section 20. So I move to delete, Mr. President, entire Section 45.
What does the sponsor say?
Accepted, Mr. President.
Any objection here and approved?
Thank you, Mr. President. That is all. And I wish to thank the sponsor for accepting
The Secretary is directed to renumber the section starting from Section 46 in view of the deletion of Section 45.
Likewise, Mr. President, I always welcome the wisdom of the Minority Leader in the improvement of our bills. Thank you, Mr. President.
All right. Majority Leader,
I move that we suspend consideration of Senate.
are there other
Yes.
amendments?
No other amendments. So I move that we close the period of individual amendments. Mr.
Period for individual amendments is terminated.
I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2436.
If there are no
under
more
committee
amendments,
report
can
number
we approval of the measure on second reading is in order. The Majority Leader, if there are no objectors, may move. We can
Approval
move
pala.
to approve on second reading.
Yes, Mr. President, I move that we approve Senate Bill number 2436 under Committee Report number 83 on second reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 2436 under Committee Report
83. Correct?
83 is hereby approved on second reading.
So I move that we suspend consideration, Mr. President, of Senate Bill number 2436 under
So
Committee
suspended.
Report. Senator Serge? I mean, suspension, Mr. President.
1 minute. 1 minute suspend.
Biofuels daw muna.
Pwede ko natin mag-video.
So tapos na yun. Yan na lang yun. Reading notice. Serge, okay na? Ready to resume, Mr. President.
Session is resumed.
With the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report number 102. This is the legislative bill on biofuels, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Resumption of consideration on Senate Bill 2622 under Committee Report 102 is in order.
The parliamentary status of the measure is that we closed the period of interpellations yesterday, February 24. I thus move that we open the period of committee amendments. Mr.
Period
President.
for debates, period for committee amendments is in order.
I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Osmeña.
Senator Osmeña is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. President. Our proposed the committee's proposed amendments would actually fall on the amendment itself, which begins on line 16 of page 1 of the committee report.
Line 15 on page 1.
1-6, Your Honor. Mr.
What?
Line 1-6. 16.
I'm sorry, but my copy does not indicate line 16, Mr. Sponsor.
All right.
Page
Then-
1 and line 15.
Line 16. In any case, Mr. President, it starts exactly at the point where we introduce the amendment, and that amendment begins with the word provided that natural gas power generating plants.
Hold on. Provided that page 2, Mr. Sponsor, line 1 reads as follows: component provided that natural
That is
gas.
correct.
So this is the line that will be amended.
Yes, Mr. President. So my line 16 on page 1 is really line 1 on page 2. So beginning on line 1 on page 2,
Yes, yes,
after the words component
yes.
provided, to delete the words natural gas power generating plants may use straight run diesel as their alternative fuel during shortages of natural gas supplies, and in its stead to insert the phrase the pure or neat NEAT diesel may be used by natural gas power generating plants under the following conditions, in parentheses, 1, there is shortage in the supply of natural gas as determined by the Department of Energy, semicolon, in parentheses, 2, the pure or neat diesel is an alternative fuel, comma, to such plants. No comma, is an alternative fuel to such plants, semicolon, in parentheses, 3, the pure or neat diesel are used only for the production of electricity, semicolon, and in parentheses 4, the use of pure or neat diesel shall be for the duration of the shortage, semicolon, provided further, comma, that the Department of Energy shall ensure that such use of pure or neat diesel shall be strictly in accordance with these conditions, period. That is I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved. May the chair request the sponsor to submit the written amendment to the Secretariat so that we do not miss the records, so that the records will accurately reflect the amendment.
Certainly, Mr.
Thank you.
President, and that is the extent of the
All right.
committee amendment.
All right. The period for committee amendments is hereby terminated. We shall now proceed with the period for individual amendments, if any. Is there any reservation for individual amendments?
Senator Soto,
Yes,
wishes to be
Senator Soto,
recognized,
start.
Mr. President.
Well, in as much as there are only 5 of us on the floor, Mr. President, I asked Senator Onasan if he has any amendments to the Biofuels Act. He said he does not. He has an amendment to the Biological Warfare Act. So we have no individual amendments, Mr. President.
Thank you for that light relief of the very difficult and serious discussion, Mr. Senator Soto. There are no individual amendments. The chair, therefore, would be ready to receive a motion to terminate the period for individual amendments.
So I move, Mr. President, that we terminate the period for individual amendments.
Any objection? Hearing none. The period for individual amendments on Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report 102 is terminated.
So, I move for the approval, Mr. President, of Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report number 102 on second reading.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report 102 is hereby approved on second reading.
I move that we suspend consideration of Senate Bill number 2622 under Committee Report number 102.
So suspended.
Mr. President, with the consent of the Senate, I move that we resume consideration of Senate Joint Resolution number 12 under Committee Report number 99. This is the legislative bill on the electricity imbalance in the Luzon grid, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none. Consideration of Senate Joint Resolution number 12 under Committee Report 99 is in order.
The parliamentary status of the measure is that we closed the period of interpellations yesterday, February 24. I thus move that we open the period of committee amendments.
Period for committee amendments is in order.
And I move that we recognize the sponsor, Senator Osmeña.
Chairman of the Committee on Energy and the sponsor of the measure is recognized in the period of committee amendments.
Thank you, Mr. President. The First Amendment falls on the introductory line. The author should be introduced by Senator Drilon and Senator Osmeña. So we just reversed the order.
The Senate President objects. The rule is that the one who files this measure first is the one on the line, first one on the line.
The record reflects, Mr. President, that you were the one who filed
No,
the first,
you.
the Malacanang measure.
No, you are the one who filed it first.
I did?
Yes, I checked that.
Okay. All right. Then I withdraw that amendment. On page 1, line 21, to delete the entire whereas paragraph, or rather, to reposition the whereas paragraph, which begins the whereas the generation sector raised concerns over the delays of new projects, and to reposition that to line 10 on page 2.
Line 10 on page 2. Between lines 9 and 10 on page 2, you mean?
That's correct.
So, all right, the lines, is it 21?
That's line 21 on page
Yes,
1.
on page 1, lines 21 to 24 is hereby moved to page 2 between lines 9 and 10. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 2, the next amendment falls on line 11 to insert the words after the phrase Power Industry Reform Act, to insert of 2001.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On line 20,
Same
Mr.
page?
President, same page. Line 20, after the phrase but not limited to the ERC, comma, to insert the following words: the Philippine Electricity Market Corporation, in parentheses, PEMC, close parentheses, comma, the National Power Corporation, in parentheses, NPC, close parentheses, comma, the National Water Resources Board, in parentheses, NWRB, close parentheses, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, in parentheses, DENR, close parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On the next line, line 21, after the words National Irrigation Authority, to insert the initials in parentheses, NIA, close parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And right thereafter, to insert a comma and the words the Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management, in parentheses, PSALM, close parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Next amendment would fall on line 23. the word, as part of the word authorization, that should be singular, so delete the last letter S.
Approved.
After the comma, to delete the following sentence, thereby ensuring that existing committed projects and plans for connection, interconnection, transmission, and rehabilitation of existing generating units shall be able to provide additional capacity from March 1 to July 31st, 2015. I submit, Mr. President.
So deletion starting from
Thereby.
starting with thereby on line 23 up to line 26, 2015, ending with 2015.
Not in my.
What?
Well, yes, I guess you are correct, but we're going to bring back in that back in later. Yes, I submit, Mr. President.
All right, approved.
And in its stead, to insert the phrase for committed projects and plans for connection, interconnection or transmission and rehabilitation of existing generating units, provided these committed projects can guarantee delivery of additional capacity within the period March 1, 2015 to July 31, 2015. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And after the word provided, which follows July 1, 2015, to insert the word further. So it will read provided further. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Then on page 2, line 32, to insert the phrase authorize the suspension of the must offer rule under the wholesale electricity spot market, in parentheses, WESM, close parentheses, rules and WESM manuals in the case of the Caliraya Pump Storage Power Plant, in parentheses, KPSPP, close parentheses, and the Caliraya Hydroelectric Plant during the period covered by this joint resolution end. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On line 42, after line 42,
On page 2.
On page 2, still on page 2, a new subsection which should read, letter F, period, coordinate with the NGCP and generating sectors the schedule of maintenance periods to ensure that only a minimum will be allowed to undergo scheduled repairs during the summer months of March, April, May, and June, period. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On page 3, line 1, after the words declare all, to delete the words Caliraya Botocan. I submit, Mr. President.
So it will simply read declare all Kalayaan pump storage.
No, not pump storage, just Caliraya Botocan, so it should now read declare all Kalayaan Pump Storage Power Plant.
I'm sorry, not Kalayaan. Kalayaan. Declare all Kalayaan pump storage plant. Is that how it reads?
That is correct, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
You're deleting CB. So that's new, the SPP. That's late. Yeah. All right. On the same line at the end, Mr. President, to delete the initials CB. I submit, Mr. President.
The initials.
And I will reread the entire line.
Please.
F, to declare all Kalayaan Pump Storage Power Plant, in parentheses, KPSPP, close parentheses.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On line 2, at the end, to delete 8 p.m. and insert 9 p.m. I submit, Mr. President.
From 9 p.m. to 8 a.m.
That's correct.
Okay. Approved.
On line 3, after the word Saturdays, comma, to insert the phrase subject to completion of the Macban-Bai, Macban-Bai, that's Bai Laguna, transmission lines, comma. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
On the same line, line 3, the word Sunday should be plural, so to add to S, I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And after Sundays, to include the phrase including holidays, comma, I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And right after the comma, to delete the phrase if and when requested by PISAM, comma, I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And on line 4, to delete the word run, R-U-N, and in its place to insert the word generate. I submit, Mr. President.
So must generate instead.
Must generate units.
Approved.
And furthermore, on line 4, after the words period hours, to insert the phrase based on loading schedule agreed upon between PISALM and the KPSPP. I submit, Mr. President.
No objection, Your Honor. Approved.
Our next amendment will fall on line 24 of the same
Before
page,
we go
which
to
is
line
page 3.
24,
Yes.
just for the record, can we now read how lines 1 to 6 will read as amended?
All right.
Just for the record.
Lines 1 to 6 will now read as follows. Declare all Kalayaan Pump Storage Power Plant, in parentheses KPSPP, close parentheses, units in Laguna Province as, in quotation marks, must load units, in parentheses as pump, close parentheses, from 9 p.m. to 8 a.m. on Mondays through Saturdays, comma, subject to completion of the Macban-Bai transmission lines, comma, and the whole day of Sundays, including holidays, and as must generate units, in parentheses as generator, close parentheses, during peak hours based on loading schedule agreed upon between PISALM and KPSPP to achieve the desired water elevation of the Caliraya Lake and optimize the existing output of the said units, semicolon, end. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Our next amendment would fall on line 24 of the same page, which is page 3. Yeah, afterwards. After the words efficiency framework, that is to delete the words focus on the low-income families /or rural communities of. I submit, Mr. President.
So how will the sentence now read?
I have an addition, Mr. President. I have an insertion,
Please proceed to the insertion.
and the insertion would be to insert the phrase all-encompassing and would involve all sectors such as but not limited to, comma, households, businesses, and government facilities in the country, semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
So can
I will read the whole thing.
Yes,
All right.
please.
Create an energy efficiency framework that is all-encompassing and would involve all sectors such as but not limited to households, businesses, and government facilities in the country. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Our next amendment would fall on line 30, and this is to delete the small letters IEC and make it capitalized. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
Next amendment would fall on line between line 36 and 37, and this is an addition of an entire subsection. It will now be called subsection L, and it will read as follows. issue guidelines to allow PISAM to directly negotiate with owners of plants to be rehabilitated or plants to be connected or interconnected with a short-term lease of lands owned or administered by PISAM, which are necessary for purposes of operating the plants to be rehabilitated, connected or interconnected during the period March 1, 2015 to July 31, 2015, subject to existing rules and regulations. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Still on page 3, subsection A,
Subsection.
line 37, Mr.
All right.
President. After the phrase, by this joint resolution, the N1 criterion under the grid and distribution codes, to add the phrase from March 1, 2015 to July 31, 2015, semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
This on line 30.
This is line
39.
37. Yes, it would be that, Mr. President.
39, all right. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Our next amendment would fall on page 4, line 2, to delete the word "end" at the end of the phrase compensation formula, and to insert a new subsection, which would be subsection 4, which would read as follows: ensure the smooth implementation of the ILP through the conduct of tests of the protocols to determine the operational and technical impact of the expanded coverage of the ILP, semicolon, provided that the participants therein shall be compensated for their deloading during the test run, semicolon, provided further that such compensation shall be recovered from end users in accordance with the ILP rules as amended, semicolon, end. I submit, Mr. President.
Objection? Hearing none, approved.
And I just move that the Secretariat renumber all the
The subsequent
Preceding.
paragraphs are renumbered.
yes. The next, our next amendment would fall on page 4, line 17, after the phrase "supply through competition," to include the phrase "including the," and to delete the words "such as by." I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
After that phrase comes the word "lowering,"
Yes.
and we include the word "off," OF. I submit, Mr. President.
Lowering of.
Yes, Mr. President, so it should now read: pursue regulatory means to enhance supply through competition, including the lowering of.
All right.
After that phrase "lowering of," it continues "the threshold." After the threshold, to include the following phrase, Mr. President: level for the contestable market. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
After that phrase, to delete the words "of retail open access." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And then comes the word "to." We move to delete the phrase "the household demand level." I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
So I shall reread up to that point. Subsection E: pursue regulatory means to enhance supply through competition, including the lowering of the threshold level for the contestable market. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And after the word "to" include the phrase 750 kilowatts in parentheses 750 kW close parentheses starting on June 26, 2015, consistent with Section 31, Chapter 2 of the APIRA, semicolon, provided that the ERC shall issue the necessary rules to support the reduced threshold of contestability to ensure full attainment of the benefits of healthy competition by all qualified contestable customers and other stakeholders, including the establishments of systems to support real-time and smooth interaction among stakeholders prior to the implementation of full market contestability, semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
Our next amendment would fall on line 25 of the same page, page 4. After the words administer the ILP, to delete ILP, which are in small letters, and insert in its place capitalized ILP.
Any
I submit,
objection?
Mr. President.
Approved.
And at the end of the sentence, to delete the letters small letter DCCS, and in its place to insert capital DCCS in parentheses. I submit, Mr. President.
Capital C.
No, this is directly connected customer, so it's D as in David,
Okay.
C as in Charlie, C as in Charlie again, and we pluralize it by adding a small letter S.
All right. Approved.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, our next amendment would fall on line 32 of the same page. After the phrase ILP participant shall be considered A, to delete the words that follow, discount or. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
The next amendment would fall on page 5, line 8, to delete the letter CB from the initial CBKPSPP. So it will now simply read KPSPP.
All right. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
And after the word achieve, to delete the phrase the desired water levels. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And in its place, to insert the phrase a maximum water elevation of the Caliraya Lake. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And after Caliraya Lake, to insert the phrase from 288.0 meters above sea level, in parentheses, capital A, MASL, close parentheses, to 288.5 MASL. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And at the end of line 9, to delete the letter CB. I submit, Mr. President. So it will now
line
be
9, yeah.
the end of line 9.
The end of line 9.
Instead of CBKPSPP.
I saw it, but
That's
it said
right.
on the end of line 9. Anyway, we know what is the amendment. Can you now read, please, the
All right.
paragraph as amended?
The subsection now reads, extraordinary expenses incurred by the Power Sector Assets and Liabilities Management Corporation, in parentheses, PISAM, by virtue of increased pumping operations of a KPSPP to achieve a maximum water elevation of the Caliraya Lake from 288.0 meters above sea level, in parentheses MASL, to 288.5 meters above sea level, and optimize generating capacity of KPSPP. I submit, Mr. President.
What happens to the remaining words, starting with differential cost of diesel and natural gas, etc., etc.?
That becomes a new section, Mr. President.
So, I'm sorry?
That becomes a new subsection D, and I shall read it.
All right. So, we delete it in the meantime for purposes of the record.
Okay.
Yes. Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
So
We delete, for the record, lines 9 starting with differential cost up to lines 10 with the word plant and semicolon.
That's correct.
So we'll now have the new section.
The new subsection would read as follows: extraordinary expenses incurred by PISAM for the differential cost of diesel and natural gas fuel for the Ilihan Combined Cycle Power Plant. I submit, Mr. President.
Any objection? Hearing none, approved.
On line 11, to delete the sentence, extraordinary expenses incurred by PISAM in supplying fuel to and expanding the fuel storage facilities of the Malaya Thermal Plant. I submit, Mr. President.
Delete this sentence. Is that Senator Oswanya?
That's the old letter D.
The old letter D?
Yes.
Lines 11 and 12.
That's correct.
So this will be deleted?
That will be deleted in its entirety.
Approved.
Thank you. And in its place, to add a new subsection E, extraordinary expenses incurred by PISAM to recover the production costs, including, including fixed and variable costs, comma, when Malaya Thermal Power Plant is made to run, semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
Approved.
And I move to renumber all the
So
subsections
renumber.
or paragraphs. There is a deletion, and the deletion would fall on line 17 and 18. I move to delete the sentence, expenses incurred by entities in increasing the storage facilities of diesel for use by natural gas plants as certified by a DOE, semicolon. I submit, Mr. President.
Line 17, 18, and 18 on page 5
That's correct.
hereby deleted.
And the next amendment would fall on line 24 after the words "the President," comma, the phrase "through the Department of Energy Secretary," comma. I submit, Mr. President.
In objection, herein approved.
And that would be the extent of the... What? I thought you said it was already here. We'll do it in by that would be the extent of the committee amendments, Mr. President.
All right. The period for committee amendments is hereby terminated. May the chair request the author, principal author, to submit the written amendments so that we can accurately reflect the same on the record. The period for individual amendments is in order, Mr. Majority Leader.
So I so move, Mr. President, that we open the period for individual amendments. So, okay, there being-
Is the sponsor aware of any proposed amendment from any member of the chamber?
None, Mr. President. They about six senators interpolated, and no one indicated any desire to amend on the floor, although Senator Legarda submitted her amendments in writing, and we have included it in the committee amendments.
Okay.
So we suspend, Mr. President, or consideration, or we close? What is the pleasure of the...
If there is no, given the fact that this is a bill with a very short duration, if there are no more individual amendments, may we close the way, if the period for individual amendments can be terminated, we can approve this on second reading. So by Monday, we can approve it on third reading, go to BICAM, reconcile the different provisions, and make it effective as early as possible, because there are certain provisions here which are effective March 1 of 2015.
So that being the case, Mr. President, there being no individual amendments, I move that we close the period for individual amendments.
Period for individual amendments, in the absence of any objection on Senate Joint Resolution number 12, is hereby terminated.
And I move that we approve on second reading Senate Joint Resolution number 12 under Committee Report number 99.
Any objection? Hearing none. Senate Joint Resolution number 12 under Committee Report number 99 is hereby approved on second reading.
I move that we suspend consideration of the said Senate Joint Resolution number 12, Mr. President.
Consideration of the measure is suspended. The minority leader is recognized.
Mr. President, just a parliamentary inquiry, just to refresh this representation's mind. The acting majority leader earlier was asking me about this, the possibility of sometimes when we take up resolutions to this effect, and then there are a number of amendments, wouldn't it be wiser to submit a substitute bill or a substitute resolution? That was his question to me. My answer was that I recall before that once you amend a bill or a resolution by substitution, you may no longer amend it, and you can only amend it once. Am I right, Mr. President?
Yes, that's also how we interpret the rules, of course, subject to interpretation or interpretation with the legal officer of the Senate.
Maybe, Mr. President, we should revisit the said rule, because that might apply to the plenary amendments.
To the
That particular rule, that you can only amend it once, once
Well,
there is a
this-
substitute amendment on the floor, Mr. President.
Yes, except that when you preface your amendment with the sentence "with the permission of the chamber," it only means that you suspend the rules for that particular amendment. So, and that is done in many instances. When the premise is with the permission of the chamber and nobody objects, then in effect
Yes.
you allow an exception to the rule.
Well,
Any
anyway,
case-
I
Anyway,
just want
yeah.
clarification just to make sure. Thank you, Mr. President.
We're just
Thank
refreshing our memories and interpretation of the rules, Mr. President. So, so I move that we proceed with the reference of business, Mr. President.
Yes. This is the amendment on biofuels. The reference of business is in order. The Secretary will read the reference of business.
Message from the House of Representatives. Letter from the House of Representatives informing the Senate that on 23 February 2015 it passed the following House bills in which it requests the concurrence of the Senate. House Bill number 2817, an act separating the Cagasat National High School, Magsaysay Annex and Barangay Magsaysay, Municipality of Cordon, Province of Isabela, from the Cagasat National High School, converting it to independent national high school to be known as Cordon National High School and appropriating funds therefor.
Please just continue to read all of those local bills, conversion of high school. We'll make one referral.
5362, an act separating the Dr. Rodolfo B. Pamor Junior Memorial National High School, Sangay Western High School, Annex in Barangay Tinorongonan, Municipality of Sangay, Province of Camarines Sur, from the Dr. Rodolfo B. Pamor Jr. Memorial National High School, converting it into independent national high school to be known as Tinorongo National High School and appropriating funds therefor. House Bill number 5363, an act separating the Tarusa National High School, Malihud Extension in Barangay Malihud, Municipality of Batarasa, Province of Palawan, from the Tarusa National High School, converting it into independent national high school to be known as Malihud National High School and appropriating funds therefor. 5364, an act separating the Ayala National High School, Tulungatong Annex in Barangay Tulungatong, Zamboanga City, from the Ayala National High School, converting it into independent national high school to be known as Tulungatong National High School and appropriating funds therefor. 5365, an act separating the Don Pablo Lorenzo Memorial High School, Pasunangka Annex in Barangay Pasunangka, Zamboanga City, from the Don Pablo Lorenzo Memorial High School, converting it into independent national high school to be known as Pasunangco National High School and appropriating funds thereof. 5366, an act separating the Parañaque National High School, La Huerta Annex in Barangay La Huerta City of Parañaque, Metro Manila, from the Parañaque National High School, converting it to independent national high school to be known as La Huerta National High School and appropriating funds therefor. 5384, an act separating the Parañaque National High School, Don Galo Annex in Barangay Don Galo City of Parañaque, Metro Manila, from the Parañaque National High School, converting it into independent national high school to be known as Don Galo National High School and appropriating funds therefor. 5385, an act establishing a national high school in Barangay Santo Niño, Parañaque City, to be known as Santo Niño National High School and appropriating funds therefor. 5386, an act separating the Lipanto National High School, Palatong, Annex in Sitio Palatong, Barangay Tabio, Municipality of Bancayan, Province of Benguet, from the Lipanto National High School, converting it to independent national high school to be known as Tabio National High School and appropriating funds therefor. 5393, an act
Before
increasing...
that, all those bills just read by the Secretary from House Bill 2817, 5362, 5363, 5364, 5365, 5366, 5384, 5385, 5386 are all referred to the Committee on Education, Arts and Culture and Finance. Please proceed, Mr. Secretary.
House Bill number 5393, an act increasing the bed capacity of the Magsingal District Hospital and Magsingal Ilocos Sur and appropriating funds therefor.
Health and Demography, Finance.
5394, an act changing the name of the Concepcion District Hospital in the Municipality of Concepcion, Province of Tarlac, to Corazon C. Aquino Memorial Hospital, increasing its bed capacity from 50 to 100 beds and appropriating funds therefor.
Health and Demography, Finance.
5406, an act separating the Kalinga National High School, Ambato Tinglayan Annex in Barangay Ambato Legleg, Municipality of Tinglayan, Province of Kalinga, from the Kalinga National High School, converting it into Independent National High School to be known as Tiglayan National High School of Arts and Trades, and appropriating funds therefore.
Education, Arts and Culture, Finance.
5417, an act regulating the Philippine credit card industry.
Banks, financial institutions, and currencies.
5452, an act declaring the second week of November of every year as Economic and Financial Literacy Week.
Economic Affairs.
5360, an act converting the Independent National High School to be known as the Dupax del Norte National High School and Dupax del Norte National High School, Poblacion Annex and Barangay Poblacion of Malasin, Municipality of Dupax del Norte, Province of Nueva Vizcaya, and separating it from its mother school, the Dupax del Norte National High School in Barangay Lamo, Municipality of Dupax del Norte, Province of Nueva Vizcaya, hereinafter renamed the Lamo National High School, repealing for the purpose Republic Act Number 9779, and appropriating funds therefore.
Arts, Education, Arts and Culture, Finance.
5433, an act establishing the Soc Sargent General Hospital in the Municipality of Suralia, Province of South Cotabato, and appropriating funds therefore.
Health and Demography, Finance.
5436, an act upgrading the Amay Pakpak Medical Center in Marawi City, Lanao del Sur, and appropriating funds therefore.
Committees on Health, Demography, Finance.
5445, an act separating the Quezon Panitian National High School, Malatgao Extension in Barangay Malatgao, Municipality of Quezon, Province of Palawan, from the Quezon Panitian National High School, converting it into Independent National High School to be known as Malatgao National High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
Education, Arts and Culture, Finance.
And House Bill 5446, an act separating the Governor Alfredo Abueg Sr. National Technology and Vocational Memorial High School at Aribungos Extension in Barangay Aribungos, Municipality of Brooks Point, Province of Palawan, from the Governor Alfredo Abueg Sr. National Technology and Vocational Memorial High School, converting it in Independent National High School to be known as Iniluyu Taham Memorial National High School, and appropriating funds therefore.
Education, Arts and Culture, Finance.
Bill on first reading, Senate Bill number 2665, an act authorizing public-private partnerships, appropriating funds therefore and for other purposes, introduced by Senator Marcos Jr.
Public Works, Economic Affairs, Ways and Means, Finance.
So there being no other matter, Mr. President, I move that we adjourn the session until 3 o'clock in the afternoon of Monday, May 2, 2015.
Any objection? Hearing none. Session is adjourned until Monday, March 2 at 3 o'clock in the afternoon.